Was saying we're so glad that you could join us in these harrowing times for this really wonderful webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Kate Yadon. I'm the Director of Development at Teen and Family Services, and I'm on the board of AFP. I'm on my 5th year of serving in that capacity. Love being on the board. I highly recommend it. And I also have the wonderful pleasure of being the NPD chair this year. The COVID chair is what I like to call myself. So I am, I'm inspired by the profession. I'm excited to dive into this panel and discuss with all these fabulous experts how we can rethink our events during this crisis. So along with the board and committee, to rethink what this year's event will look like in light of COVID-19. So that's why I'm participating in terms of NPD, and I'll let you guys know where we are in our decision making at the very end of this panel. So I'm going to dive right in. I just have a few housekeeping items. We use the chat box. A lot of you already have been. You want to share comments and knowledge during the webinar. I'm going to be checking it, and so is Melissa throughout the hour. Use the Q&A box so that we can keep track and address any questions that you have while we're going along. And feel free to private message Melissa Neely through the chat box if you're having any technical difficulties. Do not PM me because I can't help you. Let's go ahead and get started. We have got a great group of experienced fundraisers with us. So first we have Rick Byrd, who is the Executive Director at JDRF, Junior Diabetes Research Foundation, for those of you who don't know that. Rick is also an AFP board member, and Rick's team was able to turn a planned annual Promise Ball event into a really successful virtual event. Wait till you hear what they did. It's amazing. So wave, Rick. Royal wave, thank you. Next we have Maria McGee, who's the Chief Development Officer, and Brandy Ledette. There we go. Brandy, give a wave, who's the Assistant Director of Special Events. Both of them are at Interfaith Ministries of Greater Houston. Their spring event was successfully transitioned into a really amazing and creative, successful event. Wait until you hear about. Talk about touch points and stewardship and brilliant creative thinking. So they both waved. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today and telling us your story. And then our final panelist is Heather. Heather Shirk-Patrick. She is the president and CEO of Prevent Blindness Texas. And being a statewide nonprofit, she's tasked with not only rethinking their fall fundraising events, but also with adapting each of the organization's fundraising markets. So that is a big challenge. So now that we've introduced all of our panelists, we are going to dive in and just ask some questions. And again, if you think of any questions throughout the session, just put them up on the chat box, and I'll try and get to them while we are moving ahead. All right, so we're going to start with Rick, and then each of you I'm going to ask the same question. So tell us a little bit about how you've already adapted your current or upcoming special event in the wake of COVID-19.
Yeah, Kate, first of all, thanks for having me and thanks for leading this session. I think we're all trying to figure this out as we go. It's kind of the whole analogy of building the plane as we fly it, right? We're just trying to land it safely. So, 8 to 9 weeks ago, we were, our staff team was busy working with our production team for our normal Promise Ball, picking out decorations, all the typical things that go into our standard annual gala that was scheduled to happen on May 2nd at the Hilton Americas. And I think it was when the rodeo canceled, it kind of hit us that something may be different this year. And then since we work with a heightened population who's at risk for complications due to COVID with type 1 diabetes, our national organization made the decision that we won't be doing any large in-person gatherings for the spring. So we quickly knew we had to pivot because we need to continue to fundraise to support our mission. So our team and our volunteers gathered together very quickly to try to determine what can we do. And at first, when we thought virtual gala, we didn't even know what that even looked like, how to even pull that off. what was the technology that goes into it. And fortunately, we have some creative people on our team. We have creative volunteers who really kind of rallied behind us to help pivot and reimagine what Gala looks like this year. And so on May 2nd, when we would have been in the ballroom, we kicked off an e-campaign that took place over about a week to May 9th, where we actually gathered virtually for our Power of Us virtual gala in living rooms around the city and probably even around the country. We had about 600 to 700 visitors to the gala that night, which is a little less than we normally have, but we were glad to have those that we did have. And just, it was tremendously successful in all accounts. I don't want to do one again in the immediate future, but we pulled it off and are still riding a little bit of a high this week coming off of it.
Talk about the different aspects of the campaign. You said that you were in living rooms all over the country. Explain to us how that happened.
Yeah, so the mantra was we're moving our gala from a ballroom to a living room. In some cases, we actually had people joining us from their pool with photos as evidence. Yeah, so we wanted just to make it easy for people to join in and give and support as they might normally. The great thing is that while in the past we're limited to 1,000, 200 people in a ballroom, this year our ballroom was infinite, and so we were able to open this up to people who never would even step foot in our gala room because we just don't have the space, or maybe they're not even in town. And so, the week prior to the virtual gala, we had online auctions and raffles, and so people could participate in that. And then night of, we closed it with, we had 3 live auction items and a live auctioneer on site. We had a great MC and Drew Doherty from the Houston Texans who kept the show flowing smoothly. And then we had our virtual Raise the Paddle, which is a big part of our night in our ballroom, and normally raises somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 in the room. And this year, virtually, we raised over $800,000 just through that Raise the Paddle. So,
amazing.
Yeah. So again, we were very surprised and pleased.
I have somebody asking if you have data on how many donors were regular gala attendees versus, oh my God, that's so embarrassing.
Is that my walk-off music?
That's my phone that I thought I turned off.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's a great question, and we will. We've spent this happened Saturday night, and then Sunday was Mother's Day, so we took that day off to relax. And so this week we've been doing auction pickup and a lot of thank you calls. So we will be doing some data diving soon to really kind of understand and learn from what happened. Great. And happy to share those.
Write down. Somebody also wants to know what technology platforms you used, so that we'll save that for the next question. But just jot it down for me, okay? Heather, you're next. Tell us about how you've adapted your current or upcoming special events in the wake of COVID-19. We hope.
The team's done a really good job. Christina Allen and Crowder, who's actually on here, she is leading our development efforts, and her and our coordinator in San Antonio have really been creative in trying to think about the fall events, and that's where most of our events take place. So we actually only had to move one event from March into September, which was our women's health event. And we had a great sponsor who was really flexible with us. But we have had to really think about, and being a part of this panel and this conversation is helpful. Again, how do we incorporate, if we can have the event, do we add some kind of virtual component? Because even if we can have the event, there are still going to be people, I think, by October and November that don't want to go out into big groups. So how do you look at doing some kind of hybrid event? So we have 2 walks, one in November, one in December, one in Houston, one in San Antonio. So we also have to think about markets as well, so not just Houston. And so the team has been working with team captains for those events that participated last year to get their input, to see what would work, what would be comfortable. And so just thinking about the logistics of the events. So, I think that's part of this too. And we're going to talk about technology, but I mean, all the things that you never had to think about before, now we're having to think about. And so for our women's event, luckily we had already thought about recording it, but now it's, can we do something, if we do it, can we do something live too, like live streaming, and then record it? And how do we share that out? And so we also have an event called Dark Dining, and we incorporate some kind of experience for our guests so they understand what it's like to live with vision loss. So how do we do that if we have some kind of virtual event or a hybrid event? So those are all the different things we're trying to figure out as we look to the fall.
I love it. Sounds like a lot of creativity through crisis, right?
Absolutely.
All right. And Maria, why don't you talk to the question about how you've adapted your current or upcoming fundraising event in COVID-19 times?
Sure. Thank you, Kate. So our annual Tapestry Gala fell right in the middle of April, and we were planning an in-person event. We had raised 80% of the money already, but about 3 or 4 weeks out, we had to make a decision. Either we cancel the event entirely, we postpone it until the fall, or we go virtual. And our CEO had the vision to go virtual. My colleague Brandy actually executed the event, but we had the buy-in of our board and the vision of our CEO leading it. So we were in a very good position to make that event happen and to pivot in a very short amount of time. The event did really well. We ended up exceeding our net goal.
Brandy, why don't you tell them how many weeks took you to pull off this amazing feat?
A little over 3 weeks we worked with to make this happen. As Maria mentioned, we had to make a decision rather quickly to pivot once we saw that it was not going to be able to happen to even meet in smaller groups. And so we decided to go virtual, but not just virtual, but to also add a meal component to it. We decided to play to our strong suits and to utilize the expertise that we have with our Meals on Wheels program to be able to deliver a meal to each of our donors, and not just any kind of meal, but the same type of meal, quality of meal that you would have received if you were at the gala itself at the Hilton Americas. We were fortunate to have some great partners with Amity Bank and Yvonne's Cafe who prepared those meals for us, and Cisco as well. But it all came together rather nicely to be able to provide a meal that donors could heat up in their oven for 15, 20 minutes and experience the gala just as if they were there with us.
So great. And how many did you end up? So it was not only the donors, it was the table hosts and all of their guests that you served, right?
Absolutely. So we ended up serving a little over 300 meals. We were in the homes of over 400 people because we understand that some people didn't want the meals. They weren't comfortable with that. But for those who were, they had a really unique dining experience. We called it our unique Meals on Wheels experience. And even some of our donors got visits from a tuxedoed CEO who delivered their meals to them. It was a wonderful experience all around.
So brilliant. Everything is just blowing up on the chat line about what an incredible creative idea that was. And I love too that you always hear about the volunteers that deliver the meals and how much care and the bond that they create with the recipient. So they got to actually see those incredible volunteers as well. What an amazing idea, you guys. So brilliant. Really great. Kudos to you. All right, so we're going to go to the next question, which is that those of you who have already hosted events, what worked and what didn't work? And Rick, that would be you starting us off.
Yeah, so I think what worked and what helped us the most was we had a really good AV partner, LD Systems, Henry Johnson and his team, who typically do our production for our gala in the room, stepped up and helped out in a huge way. And that just made the show seamless. If you go to YouTube and JDRF Houston, you can watch the show in its entirety. And I think Melissa maybe even shared the link on the chat function, but that just made us look good. So the AV worked really well. We also really encouraged our board members, our key sponsors, table hosts to drive audience. So just like they would do in the room, they'd bring their guests to sit at their table. Is what can they do using Zoom and technology to foster that same sense of community and togetherness, in hopes that then they'll tune in together and support together. So for example, we had one board member who had 60 people on a Zoom happy hour prior to the event. And the great thing is when we had those, myself and some other staff were able to do some happy hour crashes. So instead of a table visit, we would tune into their Zoom hour for a minute and just give a shout out and a thanks and encouragement for the night, kind of a pep talk. And then we also did some pre-gala photos. So we had a volunteer photographer who went to 5 homes and did the porch photos, if you will. But we had some of our donors in tux on top and swimsuit in the bottom, standing in a pool or on their front porch on a swing. So and then we used that for press releases post-gala, which have started hitting as well. And so those were fun and made it fun for those donors as well. So those are some of the things that I thought worked really well.
That's great. Was anything pre-recorded?
Yeah, so videos, about 40% was pre-recorded. Our MC was live throughout, who would kind of tease up a video. We had some mission-related videos that were pre-recorded, a message from our CEO. But the MC and then our auctioneer and our Raise the Paddle were all live, and it worked fabulously.
Okay, so I know Martin's asking what platform it was. Wasn't it YouTube that you guys used?
Yeah, so the production and the filming was Zoom, and we used the Zoom webinar platform to record it on YouTube live.
Great. And how long did the evening
Right
last? The
about an
night
hour.
of? Okay,
Yep.
great. I also had questions, and I don't know if you want to get to it later. Logistics. How did the live auction and Raise the Paddle work for you guys?
Yeah, so the auction, so everything open bidding on auction items, silent and live, throughout the week. And then night of, we closed the silent at a designated time, kind of right in the middle of the program. So that was kind of a hard stop at 7 p.m. The live, we had 3 items. We normally have about 10. This year we narrowed it down to 3. And so the auctioneer could see the bid history for the week. So he would talk about who's bid on the item, what level, we're at this amount now, we have another bid, oh, here's another bid. So just like he would do in the room, the only thing that was different, because there's about anywhere from like a 30-second to a minute lag between live and YouTube, that he would say, we're closing that item now. And then our partner with One Cause was watching it live, and so she would shut the item down when he would close it. So there's a little bit of, that was harder than probably we'd like, but it worked out pretty well. And then the Raise the Paddle, we did have some pre-commitments, but then people can make their gift from their phone during that Raise the Paddle at different levels, and then their name popped up on the YouTube screen.
Okay, but you partnered with One Cause, who dealt with all of that technical.
Yeah,
all the back,
yeah, for auction and Raise the Paddle.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Rick. How about Heather?
So, we talked about, we haven't done anything yet. A couple of things I will say that have been, I think, that have been good to see. And my hope is the trend continues. And I think that the other panelists will agree. Our sponsor for our big women's event has been really flexible. And that has been really helpful because we're a really good partner to us. I mean, we brainstorm about look like and how they felt like they could get value if we change the event somewhat. And that is my hope going forward, that there's just that flexibility, because I think without those sponsors and partners brainstorming and actually stepping up to be a partner, we would have been in a very different situation. And we've had a great chair. He's been awesome for the dark dining piece. So the same thing, they're willing to get creative and have discussions, and they still want to be the chairs. And so that has been really helpful, but we engaged them right away to talk about what we saw happening and what we were thinking about. And I think that was really helpful because they responded right away. And so we opened up that dialogue. We knew we had to be flexible, and that this is in the time you're going to have to take a risk, I think, at least from my perspective as the CEO. It's not going to be business as usual. We're going to have to look at how to do things differently. And so I think in order to be successful, you've got to engage right away and be open to, and I think Rick talked about, if they want to change, if they don't want to be chairs, if they don't want to sponsor, okay, what's our plan B? But if they do, then how do we work together to make it happen still? So that's what we're doing.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Heather. All right, Maria and Brandy, what do you have to add to this after your amazing Meals on Wheels experience?
I can speak to the pre-planning part and then have Brandy address more of the logistics. We were very fortunate that our board was supportive of the event and let us take this risk. Our event was April 22nd, so it was one of the first virtual events in town, and we were kind of inventing it as we went along. So our board really gave us that flexibility, and also our title sponsor, Shell Oil Company, gave us that flexibility as well. And I know Brandy can speak much more to the details of any challenges we had and then what went smoothly.
Yeah, we knew that we could do certain things really well, and then other things we knew that we would have some challenges and that we needed to ask for help for. And so when it came to the video itself, we pre-produced our video and then premiered it live on a website that was dedicated. So it was tapestrygala.com. People were able to go on to the website and interact via our chat boxes and interact with one another, but we knew that that was something that we had to do. On the video production side, we had a really great staff member who's capable of doing videos. He does videos for our events, but he'd never done one as long as 45 minutes. And so that was a bit of a challenge, but he totally rose to the challenge of making that happen. And so he not only produced the video, but did quite a bit of the videography itself in about 3 days. We also worked with Ken Gale, who's our entertainment. He would have been our entertainment even if we were at the Hilton Americas. He was a great partner to work with. And then when it came to figuring out how to put that on the website, we worked with Password to make that happen. They were great at figuring out how to push it out so that we had dedicated bandwidth so that there was no glitching, no issues that might have happened if we had tried to premiere this on Facebook or YouTube going out. We did on the back end re-premiere it the next day or rebroadcast it the next day on all of our social media aspects. And that worked well as to be able to expand our reach so that people who may not have been a part of our group or our donor base before started seeing what we were doing and being able to totally interact with what we were doing. I'd say what might not have worked well was the chat side of it. We would have loved to be able to have more people interact. We saw that some of it was possibly a generational gap of not wanting to be a part of it that way or not feeling comfortable with it. We saw that most of our donations during the event came in on our website versus the text to give option that we had as well. And so we realized that, you know what, that just may be something that our donor base prefers to do in person or on the website, but it was good to try it and to see how it would work.
Great. Awesome. Okay, there's one person who's asked what other events, virtual, do you plan on doing in the future after doing your events? We can hold that one to the end. And they're also asking if we can list the vendors that you all worked with that you had great experiences with. So maybe Melissa, we can get all that to Melissa and she can put it up on the website for our listeners. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that, you guys. All right, how about, can you tell us a little bit about how your, I skipped one. All right, Rick, what do you think are the most important steps in turning in-person events virtual or digital? What was the most important step that your shop did?
Well, beyond just technology and figuring that out, I mean, none of this happens if we're not going in it together with our volunteers, our key sponsors and donors, board leadership. I mean, there has to be some consensus there. And, you know, not everybody's going to agree 100% on the final plan, but I think as long as we can get buy-in from that group, that's critical. And that's where we started. So first conversations were with the board president, with our gala honorees and chairs and gala leadership on what needs to be done. And I think to Heather's point, we had some people who said, I'd like to wait till next year because I want the in-person experience, and we honor that and respect that. And we had some who said, I'm with you this year and I'll stay with it. And they supported it in a very meaningful way. So, and then I think just open and honest conversations with our donors as to why we need to press forward. I mean, mission doesn't stop. We use the mantra this year, type 1 diabetes doesn't stop during a pandemic, and neither will we. And I think that they really bought into that. And people who could support during this time stepped up. And we also realized that, people were having challenges and may not be able to give in ways that they normally would. And we're fine with that too. And we'll be there for them now in hopes that they'll be there for us in the future.
Great. Thank you. All right. And Heather, how about you?
I think for us it was, researching. I mean, really thinking about, okay, and I think even one of the questions of what do we price things at? We do a virtual experience. How do we, are we going to have the same price? If not, why not? And so, I mean, we've spent a lot of time researching and planning and looking at different options. And I think that is part of it. Really, I think all of us think, okay, we have our plan A, maybe we have our plan B, event planning, but really now it's plan A, C, really understanding the risk involved with each and what the trade-off is. And then, I think just looking at every single detail, I think, especially if you've done an event year after year after year, you kind of glaze over some of those details. And now you're being forced to really look at every single thing that's a part of your in-person event. And, what does that mean? What do you leave out? What do you add? So I just think it's those planning and research.
Great. I had a question come up for you, and that is, how do you plan on accommodating your sight impaired? Okay, great.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talked about this too, especially around our walk, because, even if we have an in-person walk, still having that live component to as we're going to Zoom, to describe different things so that everybody can participate and have a meaningful experience. Really interesting. That's what I mean by, as challenging as this has been, it's been amazing to watch the team's creativity and really think about whether it's in person or not. It comes back to what is the most meaningful experience we can provide for the people that are supporting our organization. And that's been our conversation. And that's why for us, it's so important. Let's reach out to our participants and see where their level of comfort is, what they're thinking. So it's been a real opportunity, I think, to just really rethink what we're doing and why we're doing things.
That's great. That's great. Heather and Brandy, what do you have to add?
You mean Heather or Maria?
Either one of you. Who wants to add to that?
Well, I think looking at what's the most important steps, I'd say clear objective of what you're trying to get to. I think we really had to figure out when we look at our events going forward, what's the objective of why we're doing this? Yes, it's always fundraising on some aspect because that's what we do for our programs, but also understanding what does the donor want? What does our board need? What is it that will make people feel connected in this socially distanced time that we're dealing with? How do we still keep people connected? And so we look, of course, Maria's mentioned leadership buy-in is so important in all of this. And we were thankful to have not only our board, but our CEO to kind of help us figure out what this looks like and are continuing to help us as we look at our fall and spring programming as well.
Maria, do you want to add to that?
Sure. All I would add is that we had to pivot very quickly. Neither Brandy or I had ever done a virtual event. Our CEO, I think, had a very clear vision of what he wanted, and we were learning as we went. We had about 3 weeks to pivot. Brandy executed the event. Our colleague Sam Hashimi produced the video. And then our Director of Marketing and Communications, Sukri Woodley, worked with a PR firm with Kim Paget to push out the story of the virtual event. But we were committed to making it happen, especially during the COVID pandemic when every dollar is so critical. We knew that we had to make this work. And our Meals on Wheels team was invaluable as they were actually delivering the food. That was their area of expertise. So it was really a team effort, and it was a tad stressful, but we had a lot of fun doing it.
Sounds like you did. And it sounds, again, it's just one of those creativity and crisis moments. You guys just took the ball and ran with it. Congratulations. Really so great. All right. So our next question is, how can you tell us, how did your shop budget for your, for the shift in the special event? How did you know, when looking at the budget and reworking the budget, how did you figure that out going from a live event to a virtual event? And Rick, tell us what your experience was first.
Yeah, so the first thing we did was we said, how little can we spend and how much can we raise spending that little money? We knew we were going to have some cost savings because we weren't going to be in person. We weren't going to be feeding people. Our hotel was great to work with us. Our vendors were wonderful to work with us. So we were able to spend about 10% of our normal budget, which was great. And as we just tried to maximize, net revenue to mission, that was the first priority. From a revenue standpoint, when we first decided to do this, we had no idea what to expect. At first it was like, can we even get close to $1 million? And, couldn't even fathom that, in this landscape and never doing this before. And as the day it got closer and closer, we were like, I think maybe we can do $1 million, maybe we can do more, maybe we can get close to our net goal, which we did. And so, we had people that had already committed to tables and sponsors. And so, they got calls very quickly. Can we, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. Can we still count on you? And 95% of the people said yes. And we did have a few people that wanted to be in the room next year. And so we moved that to next year, but most were there with us and even stepped up. Some added to what they had originally committed. And we even gained a couple of new sponsors that had not committed before we're going into this space. So that was great. We didn't sell tickets because we were just trying to get as many people to tune in and register and donate night of as possible. And we didn't want any barrier or obstacle, if you will. We do have a chapter in Nashville that did sell tickets, and they're using that as, if you buy a ticket to this, you're going to be invited to a stewardship event in the fall to say thank you. But we opted not to do it that way. So just it was maximize revenue and spend as little as possible at the end of the day was our strategy, and we did it.
And so really it was your components in the event of the live auction and the paddles up, etc., that gave you your gross. What was your gross again?
We're about 1.25, 1.26 is what we're sitting at. So we've had some gifts trickle in post event, people who couldn't join us.
That's amazing.
So we're very pleased, and I will say, I mean, that didn't happen night of, right? I mean, as we all know with these galas, I mean, a lot of work goes into it, months, weeks, years before. So a lot of our money, I would say about 80% was pre-committed. So we spent a lot of time in the weeks ahead talking to our donors, and some were willing to share, this is what you can count on from me. And so we recognized those night of as pre-committed gifts. And then we did have some that we said, make that gift on your phone that night, so that your name will scroll up on the board and it might encourage others to give as well. So we did a lot of donor cultivation in the weeks leading up to this event to ensure that we had the right people in the room and those gifts hopefully coming in.
And how did your gross compare to last year? I have somebody asking.
We typically do closer to 2 million, so obviously down, but we'll spend about 10% of our normal budget, and we'll net about almost 95% of our normal net.
Fantastic. Okay. And let's shake it up and let's go to Brandy. Talk about that 3-week turnaround in the budget.
For us, we obviously budget to have our event at the Hilton Americas, to have a full AV component and entertainment and all of the aspects of it. Having a virtual event, yes, typically is less expensive. And so we knew that going in, that was going to be the case. Even going against that learning curve, we were able to work with our partners that we were already going to work with, and they came down significantly on their pricing for a lot of this. And so it's good to work with people you know, and that are on your team. And so we know that if that video had been produced outside of Interfaith Ministries, it may have cost us $60,000 plus for a full hour with other partners. And so that was a huge expense that we didn't have to take on. When it came to other areas of partnering, we were thankful to have some of our partners with Amagy and Yvonne's Cafe and Cisco come in and partner with us for this year to bring down our expenses. And so at the end of the day, we did this for a 6% net expense. And so that's amazing for us. We typically would do anywhere from 25 to 35%. And so we are very happy with the way that it ended up, and we exceeded our net for this. So I would say when you're looking at this, know that you're going to spend less than what you would do for an in-person. That may not be the case for a hybrid though. And looking at what it would cost for a hybrid and what you're really looking at, what you're really wanting on an outcome basis, if you are looking at a hybrid, which we're looking at for some of our fall events.
Really good point. Really good point. I see here Martin saying that they y'all delivered hand sanitizer and an oven pad. Haha, that's brilliant. Such really good personal touches that you guys implemented. I love that. Marie, did you want to add anything?
I would just add that we knew the event was going to cost much less than an in-person event, and we leveraged our partnerships and good relationships in the community to get the best pricing. But at the end of the day, we knew we had to deliver a flawless experience. A couple of weeks prior to the event, we were fortunate to have a featured story in Paper City by Shelby Hodge. The Chronicle did a feature story. So we were in the spotlight. There was a lot of pressure to make that event flawless. So we paid for what we needed to, namely Password Productions, to make sure it was a quality product, but we also managed to leverage his relationships to get really, really good pricing.
Fantastic. Okay, great. And Heather, I'm looking forward to your events and trimming your budget or boosting your budget. Where are you?
Right now, we've left our budgets as is because I think honestly we'll be able to do some kind of hybrid, and I do think it's going to be probably similar in cost, because even if we don't have as many people, we'll still have to make up for as many people in person. We're still going to have to add some kind of virtual components. So I think for us right now, we have not adjusted our budgets in any way.
All right, and can any of you focus on talking about future events? We have a bunch of questions from our attendees asking what you're planning on the future. Brandy had a specific question for you. What is a hybrid event, and can you describe that? And then we also had a question if we could all look at our magic 8-ball. When do we think that the timing of in-person events would be? So you guys can go at it.
The magic 8-ball is not in service right now. We are at the whim of COVID and all of the regulations that are coming in. And to be honest, they're being made up as we, or coming together as we know, day by day. And so we're hoping that certain in-person events will happen in the fall or in the spring. For IM, we are looking at for our For All Humanity luncheon that would have been in October or early November as possible a hybrid. And what hybrid to us means is part in-person, part virtual. What we're looking at when we say that is we know what it's like to do an in-person event, but we will also have to figure out dedicated staff to do a virtual side of it. What we don't want to have happen is an event happen where we're so focused on in person and we just stream a video for those who are watching. We want to be able to make sure that they're interacting and having that experience as well. We don't know if we'll do the meal side of it again the way that we did for the gala, but that's another question of, when you look at it, how are you incorporating those who are on the virtual side? These may be people who are just starting out to learn what your organization is doing, or they may just say, you know what, I'm not ready to go back to a in-person event yet, but I still want to support what you're doing. I still want to be a part of it. As well as I can. And so when we look at our hybrids, we're looking at not only spacing as we look at social distancing in the rooms, we probably won't be able to go back to a 10 top or 8 top when we look at room sizes and the number of people sitting at a table. So all of that is changing, and it's changing daily and weekly sometimes, of how we look at this as we plan going forward. And so for us, we're looking at, how do we maximize the number of people who are aware of what we're doing, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to bring in a totally new donor base and a totally new advocate base to help make sure that we're getting the word out of what is needed for these homebound seniors, the refugees, the programs that we really work with, and the volunteer opportunities that are there.
So I have a question, Brandy, quickly. Do you think that the live attendees are key to success in virtual or donor stewardship? And if so, do you think stewarding them ahead of time, or both?
I think that they are key. Well, I would say your existing donor base. I don't necessarily know that live is always a possibility, but definitely your existing donor base is always key to making these events successful. And that's whether they're in person or virtual. As we continue to look at virtual, I think that we have to realize that there are going to be some changes here, and we have to realize that norm is not what it used to be, and acknowledge that and move forward in these newer times of what can we change. I look at it as an opportunity for change, where we may have done an event the same for several years. Maybe it's time to change and change up our format, or change up our venue, or change up a way that we can bring in people who are still hungry for the topic and really a strong advocate, but also people who are looking to find out, what do you guys do? And I may not have been able to afford a $500 ticket or a $200 ticket, whatever the case may have been, but I can be a part of it if you allow me to do a virtual side of it.
Great. And you would still charge for a virtual ticket?
It truly depends. As we look at For All Humanity, we will still charge for a virtual ticket, but I say it depends on what's the aspect of each event. Are we incorporating food? Are we incorporating some aspect of it that they would still get if they were in person? But we also realize that at the end of the day, these are fundraisers for many of our organizations, and the programs still have to go.
Exactly. Rick, what would you say about using live attendees before and during, and if that really was key to your success?
Yeah, so, well, having the right live attendees. So the attendees of our event they just watched. Anybody that appeared to be live attendees were pre-recorded. So for example, an hour and a half before our event, we had 16 of our board members get on a Zoom call, and we recorded them waving and cheering. We recorded them making a toast. We recorded them clapping. So during the event, our MC would cut into our board Zoom room, and it would appear that they were actually live attendees. So there were only 3 of us that were actually live during the event. Everything else was pre-recorded. The other thing we did that played really well, we utilize youth ambassadors during our gala. So these are young kids with type 1 diabetes, and they play an important role in the night. It's also, it's a very important night for them, and they get dressed up. I mean, a lot of work goes into this for them. And so we wanted to give them some type of experience. So leading up to our campaign, we had them do videos that went on our social media, went out through eBlast, were incorporated in the night of. So it gave them an experience, helped drive traffic. During that week, those posts received more views on our social media page than we've ever received. And so it was very well received, and they're having a good time doing it. And we have some now that are about to do personalized videos to some of our sponsors and key donors as well. So that'll be fun for them. So obviously, the more pre-recording you do, the more control you have over what happens. You can also make sure that it carries the right message and the right tone and the right feel. So just those that are live, you've got to just make sure that they have the right personalities. In our case, our MC was very comfortable behind the camera. So can ebb and flow with changes and can draw things out if we need to draw things out. And so it's just having the right person participate with you.
Yeah, his energy was great. It was really good.
Yeah.
Heather, I'm sorry. Heather, I'm going to ask you. Nancy Hall asks that reserving venues usually happens way in advance. How do you gauge how many attendees will be virtual and how many will be in person? What do you think is the best way to gauge that?
Well, for 2 of our events, we're capped at how many people will be in the room. So those decisions are made for us, right? So that we have to work with those parameters, and we'll have to talk about what the virtual component looks like. For our walks, they're obviously not capped. And every year we have to estimate how many people we think are going to attend based on last year. And those are the two that the team has still been talking about, what does that look like and what does that mean? So for example, at San Antonio, we have our walk at SeaWorld. And so whatever parameters they put into place too, we'd have to follow. But we have this year a show for the participants. So if we have some kind of in-person event still there, following the parameters that are put into place, how do we then incorporate the show experience for those people that are virtual? So those are the kind of logistics and details we're still trying to figure out, and we have to work with the venue to do that. And so I think for us, some of it's really going to be dictated by the venue itself and what their parameters are, and then we'll have to work within it.
Okay, so another question that came in, thank you so much, Heather. Thank you guys all so much. You're doing such an amazing job answering all these questions. Really appreciate you sharing your experience with us. So some people think they'll be experiencing donor fatigue in the fall due to the pandemic. Do you think we should try to capture people's generosity now versus the fall when the economy could possibly be worse, not better? What do you think, Rick?
I guess I wish I had the 8-ball, right? So what I know is, and we've experienced this now, we experienced this during Harvey, but people want to help during time of crisis, and they want to help causes that are important to them first. And so, the whole strike while the iron is hot saying comes to mind. But, I think the more you delay, the more you remove yourself from the most critical point in time. And I think also your message then is a little bit diluted, because why is mission more critical now than it was during the height of this? And so I think we've all said this in this call, but everything started with mission. It's mission, mission, mission. And that's why we move forward. And if mission isn't important now, well, when is it important? And so I think, I think you act now when people have this heightened interest in supporting. That's my philosophy.
Yeah, great. Kim Sterling actually released a white paper yesterday. I highly recommend everyone going to her site and reading it. And she talks about the fact that if you've got a great mission that is something that you can communicate clearly and heartfelt, we shouldn't be afraid to ask. That exactly what you said, Rick, that people in Houston step up and want to help, and we shouldn't be tenderfooted about saying we need help now more than ever, frankly.
Yeah. One of our guiding principles is to be unstoppable, and we added to be unapologetically unstoppable this year. So we should not be ashamed for reaching out to people who support us and asking for support during this time as well.
That's nice. I love to, and tell you, but the having the young ambassadors at the event, I have a daughter with type 1 diabetes, and there are not many days that you celebrate having type 1 diabetes. So giving those kids the opportunity to actually celebrate is really, really wonderful. As a mom, I can say that's fabulous. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
All right, ladies, how about you? What are you thinking about donor fatigue, and if fall will be a time that everyone will just be over it, or if you put your mission out front, all's going to be good?
Sure. I just like to echo a lot of what Rick had said. If you don't ask, you won't receive. And we started our COVID fundraising very early, and we were very aggressive. I remember the day, it was my birthday, March 11th, but that's when we started all our campaigns. We started online campaigns that week. We hadn't yet pivoted on the event, but we were still fundraising for Gala. We were contacting our major donors, both foundations, companies, individuals. We tweaked our spring direct mail campaigns to be related to COVID. We were doing that all very early, and I'm really pleased to say we're exceeding our fundraising goals in every area. I've talked to colleagues of mine who have said, they weren't fundraising. Even into late April, they weren't fundraising due to COVID. And a lot of times it's because their leadership was not doing that. They were saying things like, oh, in this economy to give, or they were being indecisive about how to fundraise, whether to do direct mail first or do online giving. We did everything at once, and it's worked really well for us. So I encourage fundraisers not to be shy. If a donor does feel fatigued, they'll tell you, and then of course take them off your solicit list right away. To my knowledge, we haven't had one donor ask to be taken off our list.
That's great. Brandy, do you have anything to add?
I think Maria said it all.
Okay, great. You guys are a great team. All right, we've got one more question. What's the timeline for making final decisions if you're going to do on-site or virtual event? What do you guys think?
We've set an 8-week out timeline. It's like we need kind of go, no go 8 weeks out, you know, working with CDC and then local health department with a compromised community that we work with. We need to be very sensitive to those needs as well.
Smart. Maria and Brandy, I imagine you have a lot of compromised clients as well. So will you be looking at that 8-week timeline and the CDC coming up for possible mixed virtual live events?
Yes, I think naturally as soon as possible is the answer. Of course, 8 weeks is a great way of going with it. I would not suggest 3 weeks to anybody else for anything, but also having that plan B and possibly that plan C already in your back pocket so that you're not pivoting to something that you have to completely create. And so I think this is a great time for us to be learning as much as we can and figuring out how it might work for our particular organizations so that we can possibly do, if it's a in-person to a hybrid to a absolutely virtual or postponing, knowing those things and how we can pivot easily.
Great. Thank you, Brandy. All right, Heather, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I mean, I think for us, it's the same. I mean, I think just a lot of this is going to be dictated by a larger force than just us. And so I think it's, you know, staying on top of that. And then I think, again, depending on the venues, you know, we're at all different venues. And so I think approach it too is going to really make a difference. But I go back to and what Brandy just said, right? It just forces us to have multiple plans in place now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, so my big share is that NPD this year is going to be a giving day. So it's going to be a virtual event, and we are working on picking vendors. And so the vendors that you all suggested today are great. I will be calling them. But we just couldn't imagine going out to our peers who are all feeling the bounds of this pandemic and saying buy a table. So we're going to we're going to incite excitement about philanthropy in a different way. So if you all will support us through that, that would be great. So stay tuned for more details. I just want to thank everyone so very much for all of your wonderful experience and expertise that you've shared with us today. It's been really great to hear you. And I also want to thank all of the attendees for listening in and submitting so many great questions. Really wonderful. And that is, following today's session, I'm going to read now. You should receive a survey to your email as we try to establish more virtual options for our membership. We'd love to hear your feedback along with any other topics that you might be interested in for these webinars. We'll also be offering a recorded version of this session to all members early next week, along with the recap. So look for that. We hope you can join us for our next Hometown Talks session on planned giving amidst a pandemic. And it'll be offered Friday, May 29th at 12 p.m. in partnership with Charitable Gift Planners of Houston. So that's it. Everyone be safe and healthy and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you again for joining us.